Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there's one thing on this channel that I have been putting a lot of emphasis on is the fact that Americans pretend that they have full control of their country, when in reality, you don't. And this becomes extremely apparent when you go to X. Now, the reason why I point out X is the fact that whenever something happens, you have bots and foreigners from all over the country, India, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Africa, somewhere in South America. You have them just pretending that they are for whatever event took place. Okay. And one of the prime example of that is with the strike on Venezuela currently. You have bots on X who are saying, oh, what Trump did is the best thing ever. Look at the Venezuelan and they're happy. And then they go ahead and take clips that are like 2 years old, 3 years old, and then they pretend like this recently just happened with the strike and the kidnapping of Maduro. So the reason why I'm starting this off is to give you the context that you have foreigners who are pretty much deciding who Americans should and shouldn't really put their focus on. And this right here is one of the example of that. Pet slop exposes Nick Shirley $1 billion daycare investigation. Let's go ahead and listen to what Jimmy Dore had to say about this, right? And I'll give my commentary on it.
Daycare scams happening have been reported on. This isn't the first time. Why all of a sudden now is everybody up in arms about it? Why all of a sudden now is this, you get everybody amplifying this report? Why all of a sudden now? Well, it probably has something to do with Israel.
Everybody
has seen
every damn time. Like when there's an event that happened, right, and you don't want Israel to be attached to it, somehow, some way, they seem to always be the benefactor. Always.
Nick Shirley's reporting on the unbelievable fraud happening through daycare centers and Somalians in Minnesota. It's got over 100 million views on his report, and he's been boosted by everybody. And James Lee is here to tell you there's another side to this story about Nick Shirley, and let's listen.
So it turns out one of the most viral stories of 2025 about the Somali daycare fraud in Minnesota ends up being a complete psyop. Because evidently, Israeli reporters are now asserting that Mossad and Israeli intelligence, not U.S. authorities, were responsible for exposing the Somalian-ran Minnesota fraud operations.
So now you see why I said for some odd reason, America seems to be influenced by other countries besides, well, themselves. Like literally, we are in... I made a video about this. I'm going to go ahead and link the video at the end of this, and I go into a lot of depth as to the reason why Americans have lost their country altogether. So not only do we not have control over this nation, but everything, every major event is pretty much orchestrated by a foreign group. And then you have bots from different parts of the world who are pretending to be in the United States, and then they boost the whatever event and they try to make it seem like it was a favorable event that is going to benefit America, when in reality, it's not going to whatsoever. And this is a prime example of that.
How is the Israeli Mossad related to the recent corruption that was discovered in Minnesota? You're not going to believe it, but there actually is a substantial connection, and it runs through the Israeli Prime Minister office. I'll start from the end. Israel just established relationships with Somaliland, which is not Somalia.
And what does that mean? Let's take a listen.
Does anyone know what Somaliland is, really? Said U.S. President Donald Trump after Israel became the first country in the world to recognize the self-proclaimed republic in Eastern Africa. Somaliland is a small territory in the Horn of Africa that broke off from Somalia in 1991. So why does Somaliland even matter? It sits on the Gulf of Aden, one of the world's most important shipping routes. There is also a Gaza-related angle. Earlier this year, it was reported that the US and Israel have explored Somaliland as a potential destination for displaced Palestinians from Gaza.
And bingo, that is why we've been hearing so much about Somalian fraud in Minnesota, because it had already been reported weeks before by the U.S. attorney that fraud in Minnesota exceeded $9 billion. $9 billion, that's a whole lot of fraud compared to, what was it? Nick Shirley talked about $110 million, $9 billion. We're talking about a small fraction, but focusing specifically on the Somali community. And then you have the amplification of this story, which isn't necessarily organic, right? You have people like Elon Musk, Vice President J.D. Vance, Attorney General Pam Bondi, all amplifying this story. I'm not discounting that the fraud exists within the Somali community, but is the focus, is the amplification making us feel a certain way or trying to make us feel a certain way about the Somali community? That's the question. Now,
and one thing that I do want to say is that this is not about fraud. It's not, because Donald Trump has pardoned people who have committed massive amount of fraud. Some of these guys go into the billions, and they have been pardoned by Donald Trump. I went ahead and saw a video of a guy listing all the people's names. It'll take me a minute to go ahead and find it. But that's the result of that. So if you think that this is about fraud, think again, because if it was truly, those people would be locked up right now for defrauding the American people. But for some odd reason, we seem to pay a lot more closer attention to the Somalis. And there's actually a bigger motive behind that due to the fact that Somaliland has not been recognized by the state of Israel. Now, why do they want the American people to start hating the Somalis for quote unquote defrauding America? Well, I guess only time will tell, really, because you can never really tell exactly how these people think, to be honest with you. I mean, these are sociopaths, and sociopaths are very much kind of sort of unpredictable unless you know how to read them, really. And so, again, only time will tell.
according to Somali intelligence, Somaliland has accepted 3 Israeli conditions in exchange for Israeli recognition. One is the resettlement of Palestinians.
Right.
2, the establishment of an Israeli military base on the coast of the Gulf of Aden. And Somaliland joining the Abraham Accords. Well,
and this is what I'm trying to say, okay? If you were trying to do all of that in Somaliland, shouldn't you try to artificially boost, Somalian people to be to be favorable? You know what I'm saying? So that way they're more susceptible to you going into their land to plant your terrorist group there. You know what I'm saying? But instead, you're doing the opposite. Instead, you will turn the American people against the Somalians. And so, again, I'm asking, why are they doing that? Why are they trying to make the American people hate the Somalians? Even though they're trying to now sign peace deal with Somalians. You know what I mean? It's either that or the fact that there is now Somalia and Somaliland, maybe they're trying to, I don't know, try to start a civil war, maybe? Because again, 2 different groups, divide and conquer. You see what I mean? But I may be wrong.
not a lovely and convenient development for the state of Israel that they get somewhere to dump the Palestinians. They also gain a critical and strategic military base, and they create an ally in the region that did not exist before.
Right.
So maybe they get a resident independent journalist who maybe isn't so independent, if you read what this story is all about, to do a story that says Somalians bad.
Well, it certainly
I have another prediction that I have. I'll say after this.
seems fishy. And James is on it. And as we reported in the other video, that the Somaliland is real. All those things are really happening. And I think if you take the Nick Shirley story at face value, you are doing exactly what they want you to do. That, by the way, again, this story has been reported several times about this daycare scandal. It was reported as far back as 2013. But it was also reported. Can you look into? I'm almost positive Project Veritas.
I couldn't find it, but I'll look again.
I'm almost positive that Project Veritas in 2020 exposed this scandal of fraud in Minnesota. So great jobs by James Lee. Everybody check him out at 5149, his website. Don't get caught up in a psyop. Don't fall for the trap. Is there fraud happening in Minnesota? Oh, yes, there is. But who is behind it? And why?
To be quite honest with you, every single group in America somehow, somewhere get involved in frauds. I mean, they're our biggest allies in the Middle East. Let's be honest. They are involved in frauds here in America. But you would never hear that. I mean, you've never heard anybody saying we need to go ahead and take down these, our greatest allies in the Middle East who are committing frauds in the United States. Let's take them down. You never heard that ever. But rather, you'll have situations like Somalians, or you might have Asian people defrauding the American people, or Mexicans or black people, but you will never hear those people. Even white people too, they'll also get caught for committing fraud. Every single group is susceptible to commit fraud when it comes to, financial gains. You know what I mean? But again, the question that we have now is why Somalia?
Why would they choose to amplify this now? Those are the questions you need to be asking yourself, so you don't get suckered into another deep state Israel psyop. So keep your head up, keep your eyes open, keep your head up, and don't get sucked in. This idea of this daycare scams happening have been reported on. This isn't the first time. Why all of a sudden now is everybody up in arms about it? Why all of a sudden now is this? You get everybody amplifying this report. Why all of a sudden now? Well, it probably has something to do with Israel, Palestinians, and funding of terrorism, which, let's remember, the biggest terrorists are the United States and Israel. Just keep that in mind. Great Britain also.
Oh, he said Great Britain also. Let me go ahead and explain something to you guys for a minute. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my prediction here. All right. Again, please take this with caution. All right. I am not an expert on this, but the way I'm thinking about it might be correct, but I may be wrong. Now, the reason I think that they decided to amplify this story in 2025 and 6 is because, well, with the fraud that's going on, my guess is that Somalians have been taking that money and sending it back home to provide for their family. And so this is, to an extent, bringing money to Somalia. So with the crackdown on the fraud that's going on over there, perhaps this is gonna, well, not bring in as much income as it was, while the fraud was going on. And with that, now that you have Somaliland being created, if the people in Somalia do not get their way of life, do not get money that's coming from the United States of America, perhaps they might turn to their government and tell the government, hey, we're not gaining money from from America anymore. The people over there, well, the fraud that they were doing to give us money has now stopped. And so because of that reason, you need to start making changes so that way we can still provide for our family. And of course, if the government is not able to keep up with that, this may cause civil war. And with civil war, the country become extremely divided. And when that happens, the Somaliland is obviously going to go ahead and become very desperate in the sense that they are not going to open up the door for our greatest ally to go ahead and put a military base here and then take as much Palestinians as they possibly can, because we also need to keep in mind that Palestinians don't want to leave. Let's go ahead and, just put that in the back of our mind. Palestinians do not want to leave. So I don't know exactly how they're going to go ahead and move the Palestinian down to Somaliland. But let's say, civil war happened in Somalia, Somaliland and Somalian people decide to start fighting with each other. Our greatest ally in the Middle East is going to go ahead and take advantage of that. And then the deal is definitely going to be signed. And then they're going to come in and be the, savior, right? To stop the war. And with that, obviously, the whole plan is going to be complete. Again, take that with a grain of salt. I'm just throwing hypothesis here. I'm not sure. I am not sure if this is what's going to happen, but I still can't seem to wrap my mind around the fact that this entire story has been amplified, even though back in 2020, 2021, they've already spoke about it, but it didn't become so big until now. And there's a reason behind it. If I end up being right, I just want to go ahead and say that I was the first one to tell you. And if I'm wrong, oh well, it was a good guess. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, please don't forget to leave a like and sub, and I'll catch you guys later.